Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So I wanted to talk a bit more about these Westminster Accounts. The last Pursuit of Truth I talked about. There's been a few more of them on Sky News and Tortoise Media. It looks like they've opened a can of worms. I'm sure the politicians, even though they've been declaring all this stuff now because the way Sky have presented it, I guess it's going to make a lot of people question. I mean, I'm already new, isn't it? The thing is, like, that they want to, say we're being transparent and this is just part of politics, giving money, and we need money to run these things. And then they were sort of, one of them was like poo-pooing that, if we don't give transparency, then conspiracy theorists will latch onto this. But the problem is you've got to wonder, in the world that we live in, where money is, well, no one gives money away for free unless it's a charity, is it? No one's. I don't buy this, that these major companies are giving donations or etc. for nothing in return. I know that is, I believe, isn't that lobbying? And there are some that are allowed to do it through that way, but most of these ones that I'm going to put the clips throughout this presentation are non-lobbying, i.e. so they're giving money but there's nothing in return. In this world that we live in, I can't believe that people will not. Well, why would people give hundreds of thousands of pounds for nothing in return? The world doesn't work that way. I wish it did work that way, because there wouldn't be all these poor people around, would they? There's a few philanthropic people, but they're very rare. And whenever you give money, I think people will feel some kind of obligation, even if it's an unconscious one or subconscious, whatever you want to call it. Especially if it's around, like if there's some debate that they're doing about, I don't know, say broadband or something in a certain area, and some broadband company that's involved in that gives money to the local MP, but doesn't say anything, doesn't say like, please make sure you agree this deal so we can put our broadband in. It's just, here's the money. But subconsciously, I'm sure that will make him think, wow, this is a nice guy, isn't it? This is a nice company. Look, they're giving me loads of money. And, and then it sways his vote even without him even thinking or even being asked. Subtle like that. Why are all these, why is it that businessmen meet other businessmen and network and all this kind of thing, even when before there's even any kind of suggestion of doing business with each other? It's to create those things. The same as that they were talking about, there's some countries, American, etc., where they invite MPs over to see America, etc. They pay them to be able to go there. That's to smooth them and to get them to be pro in any regards. If you get something free, if someone gives you something and you go there, obviously you're going to have some warmth towards them. You're certainly not going to have any negativity, are you? So in this world where money is used in that way, I can't believe there isn't some, it may not be everyone, but I can't believe there isn't any corruption. And that's why I think that this idea of second jobs, is there enough time? The country's in a shit, and there's lots of things that are out of place within society when it comes to the NHS, when it comes to social care, mental health, and all these different aspects, roads and all this stuff that needs their attention. Do they have enough attention to be able to do a second job? But I think it should be a second job where it is beneficial, in the sense of, like if they're a nurse or a doctor or a policeman, or they're working in Tesco's, they're front facing, then they can meet with people and see the actual struggles that people are going through. Then I don't have a problem with that. But the problem is when it's like consultancy or something like that, when they're making money off the back of being a member of Parliament. That's, I think, the problem, or just an MP, in the cabinet, etc. I don't think they should be able to make money off. Their position is to in the system that we live within, although I don't believe in this system, but the system that we live within is that they're there. We vote them there so that they can do the work, because someone has to do it, someone has to make these decisions for the benefit of everyone living in that small circle of land that they've dominated and possessed and encircled and called a name. So therefore they shouldn't be gaining out of that. If they want to give consultations and help companies, it should be free, because they're already being paid to do their job as a member of parliament, so they shouldn't be charging for that. So that's where an abuse can come in, and they're making money off the back of doing this serious job that they should be really spending more time on. So I think that should be outlawed. But if they want to work, the thing is, like, someone will say, well, I want to be a lawyer because I want to, see the cases and the people and etc. And yeah, maybe there is something to that. But none of them ever say, well, I want to, be able to connect with the people. I'm going to go work in McDonald's. They'll always work in somewhere where they can front face and have people and etc. But it'll always be high paid jobs. So really, I do question, is it really the morality of their answer? Are they really, interested in the people and getting and seeing how modernity works? Or is it really about, that may be an aspect of it, but it's really about earning more money? So, yeah, that would be my view on it as a member of this place. I was listening, the clips I'm going to put in, I'll probably actually stick them at the end now. There's no point putting them in the middle. The first one it was the second Westminster Accounts. I don't know if there's other ones that I'm going to put in. I don't think so. But it was to do with this aspect of money donations, and they, I can't remember his name now. This guy, analyst, he knocked on the door trying to find these companies, I assume through Company House, finding where they're registered. And there was no one in. It was an abandoned building, and there was no one there, and tried to phone them, and they gave lies that someone's going to come. No one came. So that allows, is it, who's actually behind these companies? Anyone can set a company up without any staff or any building. You just have to have you just have to have a building, isn't it? But you don't actually have to have any staff or anything. So that's an easy way to hide money, and if this company doesn't really exist, who is really this money come from? And what is, because that could be a way of hiding money, and that's where I guess some people will say the conspiracy comes in, because that definitely looks like that. And when people are asked, like Theresa May were asked about her financial gains being one that's made the most money, she's not willing to answer, or her office. And so yes, they're doing it's like in this world, the bare minimum. The bare minimum is done. The bare minimum. It's like today I got a call from CITS SALT, speech and language therapy. We're chasing them for 2 to 3 years, and they're finally going to give my autistic daughter some speech and language therapy, which she desperately needs to be able to communicate, help her communicate. And the sessions are 30 minutes. 30 minutes. I mean, it was lucky I was in a good mood, because 30 minutes, what are they going to do in 30 minutes? 6 sessions of 30 minutes. I mean, they're doing the bare minimum. And that's why these things aren't solved, because it's just like a facade. It's just like a face value. It's just like making it look like, yeah, we have all these organisations, they're all doing these things, but they're not really solving the problem. It's like a band-aid. Maybe there's not enough money. Maybe there's not enough expertise. That's the thing, because a lot of the things I'm sure they're going to say are things I could Google up. Things by people who have never even had an autistic child and come up with these ways that never ever work. Really, these organisations should be run by people who have autistic children that have actually found the answers to these things. Like, as if autism isn't 60 years plus old, or maybe even time immemorial. But it's just the same thing with the whole system. It's the bare minimum. Same with like the NHS, the other clip I'm going to give you. Maria Caulfield, who's an MP but also works as a nurse, and yet she's conflicted by her answers, because they show her a graph of how the Conservatives, this is the clip I'll play, the Conservatives have underpaid the NHS since their time in office compared to Labour previously. and they want to blame it on COVID and the flu pandemic to be the shit that the NHS is in. But it's not to do with that. You can see quite clearly it's because of the lack of money that's been put in. We all know, we all go to the GPs, we all go to the hospitals, we all see how bad they are, how dirty they are, how busy they are, how, it's like a second class kind of medical centre that you get. But still, it is something that, should be a lot better. If money wasn't involved in this power and all this kind of stuff, there's no reason why it wouldn't be better. But the limitations is money, obviously, and less money, less staff, less equipment, less medicines, less everything. Obviously, that's But the nurse because if she was just a nurse, she would have said yes. Like all the other nurses are saying, we've been underfunded, we need money, we need staff, and etc. But because she's an MP, she can't say that. She wants to defend the undefendable, and that's the problem with these MPs, is even when you put the truth or facts in front of them, they still manage to weave out of it or just ignore the answer or just ignore you at all, like they did with the Sky analysts who tried knocking on Theresa May's office door. They're members of Parliament. They're paid for us to do this job, and yet they're you can't find them, you can't ask them questions. And like even with Steve Barclay, the NHS, the health minister, met with them. They met with them on the visor. I guess he can set the agenda, but he doesn't really want to talk about pay at a certain time or whatever. I mean, my goodness, if you want to solve these problems, the only way to do it is to talk to each other, and that's what we pay them to do. That's why we've elected them, is to do this for us. And yet they don't really want to do it because maybe they don't have the money, or they want to put the money into war instead. Because they much rather look better in that way. I don't know why. I mean, we shouldn't be in wars with this kind of mentality that we should have evolved by now. But still, we have these silly things fighting over bits of land that we can never ever own, that we've possessed ourselves, that was freely given to every single baby that was ever born. But we're fulfilling those people of 100 years ago, thousands of years ago, that have cut it all up and left us in this shithole system of power, greed and possession and money. Anyway, you'll see these clips and you'll see how frustrating it is that, even in this world where we would say that democracy is, sacrosanct and, that it's, above reproach, and yet you can see the ways in which these things, the people weave out of them. They can get away with things and still look like they're somehow, oh yes, I'm very smart, I'm doing the right thing, I'm very transparent, I'm not leaving the country down a shithole with no nurses and letting strikes and people die of COVID or flu because we don't have enough money and staff, because we want to give it to ourselves instead through these shadow companies. I don't know. I mean, I know I've got no proof of that, but, obviously we know in other countries and we know in history these things happen. Wherever money's involved, like in the Bible says, money's the root of all evil. Why? Why do we still have it? Why are we keeping ourselves shackled up to a system of years ago that makes no sense, that doesn't benefit humanity? Anyway, there's plenty of other pursuits of truth that I've gone over that. I don't know. This is just another example in my lifetime. I'm sure I'm going to end up dying with the same things that I'm saying every single time in these pursuits of truth. Nothing's ever going to change. And even my children, maybe they'll do pursuits of truth on YouTube or TikTok or wherever in the future, and they'll be saying exactly the same things that I'm saying, exactly the same things that our forefathers, the people of, like George Orwell and H.G. Wells and the what's his name? Tressel. And all those people that came before us, and Dickens, who talked about all these sufferings of humanity and all this absurdity, and yet still, we won't change it. We'll keep voting for the same thing. We'll keep championing these things that are keeping us in these same shackles. Take care, take ease, God bless, and peace, and enjoy these clips.
Tracing the network of donors to MPs in Parliament has never been easy. Links have long been obscured in a system that was never designed to be properly analysed. Now, here's something you genuinely haven't been able to do before. You might recognise these names. They're the top donors to political parties, 4 big unions who've given over £21 million to Labour, wealthy individuals, Lord Sainsbury and JC Bamford, who opened their chequebooks for the Lib Dems and the Conservative Party. But this is what we've never been able to show you. Here is who's been giving the most cash and support to individual MPs over this Parliament, so since December 2019. Again, some names you recognise. 2 of the biggest unions and the biggest donors, Unite and GMB, with some of the biggest sums going to Labour MPs on the left of the party. In fact, over half of Unite's £600,000 of donations to individuals go to just 3 Labour MPs, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Richard Bergen and Barry Gardner. But then this becomes a story about what we don't know. And to tell it, we're going to focus on 2 companies in this list. The third biggest donor to MPs in this Parliament is a little-known entity, a Hertfordshire business called MPM Connect. They give well over £250,000 to just 3 well-known Labour MPs, Yvette Cooper, Dan Jarvis and Wes Streeting. Such a big donor, so little information. A company, but it's not clear what it does or where it gets its money. It has no website, its accounts say there are no employees, 2 directors are listed, but no public route to contact the company itself. We just wanted to understand who was behind the donations and why they gave the money. So we asked the MPs themselves. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who received a donation of £180,000 from the company. Her office gave us a statement they said was not to be quoted. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting said everything was declared in the proper way. Dan Jarvis said all of his donations support his work as an MP, not the answers to the questions that we hoped for. So we travelled to Hertfordshire to the company's registered address. Hello there, I'm from Sky News. We're trying to get in touch with people from MPM Connect. This is the address for MPM Connect. Peter Hearn or Simon Murphy. Do you know whether I can speak to them or how I can contact them? No. Do you recognise the names I'm talking about? No. You look confused. Have you heard of MPM Connect?
Accountants.
Yes, have you heard of MPM Connect?
No.
You haven't heard of MPM Connect? Its registered address is here. Have you heard of Peter Hearn or Simon Murphy, the 2 directors for MPM Connect, who's registered here? Yes, we're from Sky News. We're trying to find out more about MPM Connect. Yes. But you said you haven't heard of MPM Connect.
No, I'd rather not speak to
you. But why not? We're just trying to find out about MPM Connect. Okay, so there we have 2 individuals in there who say that they haven't heard of Peter Hearn, of MPM Connect, and shut the door when we ask more questions. No light being shed here, just an accountant's firm where hundreds of companies have registered themselves. This all completely permitted under a system that allows firms as well as people to donate, but makes answers hard to reach. All a question of transparency, and bigger than one company or one party. There are examples in this leaderboard where the data alone presents us with a straight-up mystery. Here is the case of IX Wireless. Why would 24 MPs, all Northern Tories, each be handed between £2,000 and £9,000 from a small, little-known Northern broadband company? Why would they do it? And who's behind it?
A new beginning, a new dawn, a new horizon.
Glossy promotional videos promise a network for everyone.
and IX Wireless have won high-profile support from government. Then Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden appearing next to founder Tahir Missan for the firm's Blackburn launch.
It really is going to provide some of the fastest broadband speeds on the planet to tens of thousands of people across the Northwest.
Not all locals were as impressed as the government minister, many angry at the sudden appearance of large poles put up by IX Wireless in their neighbourhoods. The company's website, its accounts, phone calls to IX Wireless and its sister company 6G Internet, based at the same address, offered few clues why the firm should be donating in this way.
We've hit a bit of a brick wall because they say it's company policy not to hand the media the email address for the press office. So we're just going to have to knock on the door. There's nothing identifying any company whatsoever. The floor looks pretty damp. There's really no sign of life. It doesn't look like there has been for some time.
No answers, so I called the number on their website. They immediately confirmed this was the right address.
I'm calling from Sky News. My name's Sam Coates. I'm just trying to get in touch with somebody from IX Wireless to answer our questions. I'm actually standing outside Ribble House and there doesn't seem to be anybody here.
She sounded unsure.
Are you inside Ribble House?
She said there will be and that she'd find someone to answer my questions, then put me on hold.
Thank you for holding.
After a while, I was told there was nobody who could talk to me.
Is anyone in there? Does anyone work in there?
No answer. She asked me for my details and said someone would be in touch. The call never came. 24 Conservative MPs have accepted donations from IX Wireless. One has since defected to the Labour Party. Christian Wakeford described how he applied for campaign cash to fellow MP and head of the Northern Research Group, Jake Berry. When it arrived a month later, they were told to register it from IX Wireless.
Before you were told that the donation had come from IX Wireless, had you ever heard of them?
I'd never heard of them, no. Literally the first time I'd ever heard was that email saying this is who you need to put against the register for the donation.
Jake Berry declined to answer what his relationship was with the firm and its founder, Tahir Missan. The Westminster Accounts project was designed to show us who gives and help us to understand why. But in some cases, answering those questions is simply not possible. The current system does not make it easy to follow the money, and MPs can choose to avoid the most basic questions.
I think the basic assumption of most MPs is that if they're following the rules that they've been told to follow, they've made their declarations. But I think there's a bigger question here. Is that transparency actually sufficient? If an MP is asked for more information, should they feel that actually that is something that they're willing and able to give? Do they actually know the answer to some of these questions if they've taken money from a company that they don't necessarily know how that is funded? I think that's actually quite important.
MPs tell us the rules on donations give us transparency, but just following those rules has left so many questions unanswered, an absence of information. The most important donations go to the most important people who have the biggest sway over our lives. Leaders, past and present, under the spotlight tomorrow as we continue to examine what's in the Westminster Accounts.
It feels to me like a lot of people might be genuinely quite frightened right now about the state of the House Service. I mean, we can just take a look at this graph. This shows the number of ambulances waiting longer than an hour to hand over to patients. So we know what that means. That's ambulances backed up outside hospitals with people inside that can't get a bed. It's concerning. The red line at the top is this current year. And you can see it's far higher than at any point during the pandemic. I mean, is this a health service that's in crisis?
Well, winter is always a difficult time. You know, my 25 years of nursing,
But we can see the comparison to other winters here. It feels an exceptional winter.
It is an exceptional winter, and I was just about to say that, you know, I've worked in normal winters when we've had ambulances queuing and declared critical incidents at the A&E that I worked at. But this is a different year. We're seeing a twindemic of both COVID and flu. So we're seeing, even compared to in the last decade, the most flu admissions that we've seen. There's nearly over 5,000 people in hospital at the moment with flu, over 6,000 in hospital with COVID, and many of those are over 65 with lots of comorbidities, which means they're much more unwell in hospital. And that shows you the scale of the numbers that we wouldn't normally see even in a winter when we have normal winter pressures. And staff are also facing those pressures. We have around 60,000 staff members in the NHS off sick in any one day at the moment because they too get respiratory illnesses, COVID, flu. And so that's also having an impact on services. So this is a very, very difficult winter, even compared to most usual ones.
I mean, our next guest, who we'll hear from in a moment, Dr. Adrian Boyle, President of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, he believes there are around 300 to 500 unnecessary deaths every week because of delays in emergency care. Do you accept people are dying because of delays?
Well, we know that this is a difficult winter. We know there are excess deaths for a number of reasons. You know, the Chief Medical Officer has outlined
delays in
some of those. I don't recognise the figure that you've quoted there, but what I can say is that we are working really, really hard to get people into hospital. We know that around 13,000 people are in hospital in any one day that shouldn't be. That is a shifting group of people. That's not the same 13,000 every single day. If you look at December, we got 8,000 of those patients out of hospital with care packages either to home or to care homes or to other settings. And yet the next day, another group of patients are admitted really unwell with COVID, with flu, with respiratory illnesses. And they are often complex patients who, again, will take time to discharge. That's why the Prime Minister held the forum yesterday with a range of health professionals to see what more we can do. We've given 500 million this winter to get social care packages in place, to get people out of hospital, because that's the number one reason why ambulances are stuck at the doors of A&Es, because they can't unload their patients, because A&Es can't discharge their patients to the wards. So that's why we're focusing on social care.
You know, when I interview people who work in the health service, I think there's a bit of a frustration, frankly, at the government trying to say that this is just because of COVID, it's just because of an exceptional flu year. And they say it's actually because of underinvestment in the health service that goes back for years. And I just want to have a look at this. This is a funding chart, and it shows the annual changes in health spending. And you can really see that from when the Conservatives came into power in 2010, there has been a queer squeeze in funding for the health service. I mean, you're a nurse, you obviously care deeply about the NHS. Do you understand why people might be, you know, angry, I guess?
Well, you've missed off a couple of years there. So
to be fair, it's not been missed off. This is where it ends, right?
Well, no. So we've increased by 11% the funding in the last couple of years.
Do you accept that since 2010, between 2010 and 2020, there was a squeeze in funding for the health service that people are now saying in the health service this is directly related to a shortage of beds, a shortage of doctors, and the delays we're seeing now?
What I would say is that, and the Institute of Fiscal Studies have highlighted that, and they're not exactly friends of the government, that there's record levels of investment. There is an 11% increase in funding, which is missing off your chart. That has meant that we're opening up 7,000 new beds in the NHS. It does mean we're recruiting over 10,000 more nurses, which are in place now.
So are you having to make up now for underinvestment under previous Conservatives?
We are investing in record levels of funding, not just for the NHS, but also for social care. And these issues that you see around ambulances queuing up, beds not being available, they're in all four devolved nations. Whether it's Labour, who are running the NHS in Wales, are facing exactly the same pressures, and sometimes their performance in certain indicators are worse than in England. The UK government just runs the health service in England. The SNP in Scotland are facing exactly the same pressures. And it's not just within the UK. If you look at other countries, Ireland, Italy, Spain,
Germany,
let's
look at some other countries, shall we? Let's look at some other countries, because I think we can also show, here we go, this is hospital beds per 100,000 people. The red line in the middle is the average, and then you have to go all the way down. Only Sweden is lower than the UK. So if you're looking at international comparison on hospital beds, we're doing pretty poorly.
So yeah, again, you're looking at 2020 data. In the last 2 years,
latest available.
we're opening up 7,000 new beds within the NHS. We have opened already over 90 surgical hubs, which is tackling our surgical backlog of 7 million people. We've cleared almost
We've been
completely.
in power for 13 years.
But we've cleared almost completely the people waiting for 2 years or more for their surgical waiting list. We're on track to meet those waiting 18 months by April, and then we'll be focusing on those waiting for a year. So we need to look at the most up-to-date figures. 7,000 extra beds will make a huge difference to the NHS.
Okay.
Qatar, welcoming the world. But long before the fans arrived, came the MPs. Dozens visited the country before the World Cup, and Sky News' Westminster Accounts project can reveal the Qatari government spent over £240,000 in hosting them. MPs insist their visits were purely educational, but this part of a system that, some say, is all about persuasion. All-party parliamentary groups, where MPs from all sides can come together around shared interests and issues. They do research, make visits and publish reports. Loosely regulated, they have no official status in Parliament, but they're a big part of the Westminster system, and what they say carries weight.
MPs are calling for a review of the use of so-called smart motorways.
He now says he'll be starting a new group of MPs to push that further.
Sort out our drugs laws.
British parliamentarians are worried the Saudi package won't meet UK travel regulations.
MPs want the manufacturer to make amends.
Vigorous pressure being exerted on companies who frankly have got away with murder.
Huge influence in the public debate, but what happens behind closed doors?
Whether you're lobbying for a bank, a religion or a nation state, APPGs might not be well known, but they are big business. £20 million has been funnelled into them over the course of this Parliament alone. Most of that goes on paying for organisers, reports, research, events and trips. And there are plenty of these APPGs to put money into. 753 active groups. That's more of them than there are sitting members of Parliament. And these are the ones that are getting the most money. So many different subjects covered here in just the top 5. Banking, Christianity, levelling up, tech and artificial intelligence. There's an APPG for every sector and every cause. And this is where the money's coming from. Names you've probably never heard of. But what they say they do is revealing.
Of the top 10, 6 of these companies are registered for lobbying, and many others have a clear agenda. So much of life in Westminster is lobbying, the art of persuasion central to politics. And APPGs can provide a rich canvas. It takes just 5 MPs to set one up, and companies can fund them directly, giving to a group that matches their cause, or they can give cash via a lobbying group. It's their job to convince politicians and governments to do what they want, but it's not always easy to get them to speak on camera. So when I was offered the chance to chair an event on lobbying in Parliament, I couldn't possibly say no.
And we've got a brilliant panel here tonight to talk through that.
A room of lobbyists making the case that they can be a force for good. They see APPGs as a powerful tool.
I know our APPG helped influence getting more money for Northern culture in the Levelling Up, White Paper, Levelling Up Fund. We did that. We know that with Net Zero. We know the action plan, the 2030 target was reduced because of what we said. We think that, but it was had influence. And that's bringing that group together. It's really effective.
But finding it hard to defend the system.
Some people worry that APPGs are used through the secretariats, the sort that you run, in order to push particular corporate agendas. Is that true?
I think it might be true. I think probably most groups do things or operate the way we do.
I think there are a minority of APPGs that are funded by certain organisations who are peddling their line, and they are trying to unfairly influence parliamentary decisions.
There are too many of them and it's too easy to set them up. Where there's a potential problem is in the lack of transparency on funding, the lack of transparency on their objectives and the lack of transparency on how they behave within Parliament.
Can you name some examples or give some scenarios where there's an issue?
No.
Why not?
No, there are 650 to choose from, so...
But you think there are issues, that you know that there are issues with some of them because they're not doing what they say on the tin, they're actually tools of individual corporate vested interests and there's no way of stopping it?
I don't say that.
Do you think there's unethical behaviour with APPGs at the moment? It's not a no.
I know.
A stark warning from one of the government's top ethics watchdogs.
I think this is the next big scandal unless we take action. But a number of them are, the Secretariat comes from professional organisations, from lobbying groups and from organisations that are particularly axe to grind. And I don't think there is sufficient transparency in terms of why they're doing it.
There are clear examples of a business putting its money into an APPG to try and influence policy. The CBD APPG are funded by a single company with a specific interest. Tenacious Labs open that easing cannabis regulations is the company's goal. But they say it's the MPs who call the shots.
What you have to do is you have to persuade some MPs or officers, officers there, 5 of them, that it's of sufficient interest to them, that if you do a bunch of grunt work to supply them with the heavy lifting, that they're prepared to spend some time on it. And it's their APPG, not ours, and they make that very clear as we go along, providing them with sensible first drafts for a discussion to happen around. And that's our job. We work for the APPG. We don't, we're not the tail wagging the dog.
Millions of pounds going into a largely unregulated part of the political system. Many all-party groups work to inform and educate, but even those who work at the heart of them admit they could be open to abuse. The Westminster Accounts makes it easier to follow the money.